Next, in our roster of sessions for future CX talent strategies, we'll be talking to Sjiva De Meester of 9 Yards Innovation about making data-driven people decisions. Stay with us for this talk.
The need to attract, engage, and retain talent has never been more crucial as the workforce of the future continues to morph right before our eyes. Decoding the vital points in the employee experience journey entails a strategy that allows for seamless gathering of feedback and intelligent interpretation of data with the objective of implementing intentional actions. Today, I invite you all to join us in this timely conversation on making data-driven people decisions. The CX expert joining us today is the founder and chief psychologist at 9 Yards Innovation, which helps companies drive strategic value and make better decisions. She has over 15 years of experience working with senior human resources, customer experience, and business leaders. 9 Yards drive innovation by combining psychology and data science to create tech solutions that help companies innovate, engage, and accelerate. By combining the latest innovations in behavioral science and technology, 9 Yards helps companies maximize their candidate, employee, and customer experiences to achieve their goals. The team has led award-winning projects in Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, Philippines, Hong Kong, Taiwan, China, London, and New York. She is an exceptional leader and creative achiever. She believes in giving back to society, especially in the areas of health and education. She mentors various aspiring entrepreneurs and leaders who are trying to build a bridge between social and data science. I'm delighted to have with us a leader who has made a significant and niche in the CX space. Let's all welcome Ms. Sjiva De Meester. Hi, Sjiva. Welcome to our conversation today.
Thank you, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing great. And, I'm very excited for our talk. I should have said, welcome back. We've done it last year, and that was such an amazing webinar. I think I remember it's about AI-powered talent acquisition, and the conversation is all about recruitment and how it's evolving over the past years. I feel like this is like a part two of that continuation of that conversation, and I'm very much sure this is going to be an eye-opening conversation, and we will learn a lot from you.
Well, thank you for inviting me back then.
So I know you're ready. I do have a series of questions that I'll be asking you today. So let's start.
Yeah, please do.
All right. Well, we'd like to get to know you, Sjiva. What excites you? You've been doing this for some time. What excites you about the convergence of data and psychology?
Okay. It's always a tricky question to tell a psychologist we want to get to know you, right? So I will try not to overcomplicate this. But basically what excites me personally, is that we are doing something very unique in this field. Like as a person as well, I'm someone who rather wants to stand out and not necessarily fit in. So doing something unique is something that gives me energy. And so when we look at what we are doing, so data and psychology, when you look at what data scientists can do, they know data very well, but they often don't bring that in-depth expertise of understanding humans and how humans make decisions. They don't necessarily have that type of expertise. Then psychologists, on the other hand, they are very good in statistical analysis, but they don't necessarily know how to build predictive models. And so our team really builds a bridge. And you mentioned we're doing something niche, but from my point of view, also something unique. And that is something that really excites me. Yeah.
Love it. Thank you for sharing that to us, Sjiva. It's always, like I always say, it's always nice to get to know our guest. Now, you mentioned, data, the power of data. When it comes down to making data-driven people decisions, where does the priority lie? Is it on customer experience or employee experience?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it really depends on where the company is in terms of their data maturity on the one hand, and also what is important for them from a business strategy perspective. So from a data maturity perspective, I think the ultimate objective for most companies is to get all of the data that they have with regard to employee experience on the one hand and customer experience on the other hand, to bring all of that data into one place. And the moment that you bring it into one place, you can really do end-to-end analysis to see, did the experience of the employees actually affect customer satisfaction? And that is tremendously powerful. And so moving towards bringing that in one place, and as TDCX calls it, having one data lake can be very powerful and can be a true competitive advantage. Especially if then one person is also overseeing that, whether that person is a data officer or an experience officer. The title in itself doesn't matter, but the responsibility basically looking after both employee experience and customer experience makes a difference. From a business strategy point of view, so once you have that foundation in place and you can access all of your data, then it's about, okay, what matters from a business perspective, and where do we want to go to? Companies that do not link their data strategy to their business strategy, they do not necessarily see the value of that. And obviously, I would say with the last couple of years, I think the last 3 years with COVID happening, a lot of the focus is on employee experience. I think with working from home and mental health issues that are related to that, employee experience has become a lot more important. So I wouldn't say that one's necessarily more important than another. It's really about bringing it together and having an end-to-end view. But we do see that at the moment, there's lots of employee experience focus.
Thank you for sharing that to us, Sjiva. And you're saying that from a data perspective, a single unit in the organization should be driving customer experience and employee experience. Making more data-driven people decisions is not something that happens overnight.
Yeah.
But where do companies start their journey?
Right. So there's a couple of things to take into account if you want to start. I think first and foremost, it is looking at leadership, and it's not just them buying into it. I think that would be oversimplifying it. It's really leading by example. Like if you want to really have a data-driven culture, then it's about leaders making data-driven people decisions in this case, and also expecting that from everyone else that's in the room. Now that comes with sort of the requirements that your leadership team needs to understand the fundamentals of data, right? And so when we look at data analysis, things such as what's the difference between a causation and a correlation? And that sounds, a bit technical, but fundamentally, as it's very important to understand, it's not because two things from a data perspective tend to happen at the same time that there's a causation there. And so you don't have to be an expert in any regression models, but you need to kind of understand the fundamentals of data analysis. And the same for data science. What is machine learning? A lot of leaders that still do not necessarily understand that very well. And if you do not, then I would definitely recommend to take on a bit of a strategic course on what is machine learning, and what is supervised machine learning, what is unsupervised machine learning, how do we determine accuracy, what kind of models exist. These fundamentals, and I call it fundamentals, are key if you want to make data-driven decisions, and your entire leadership team should kind of understand that. So providing training in that regard is really essential. The second thing is more about seeing, especially when it comes down to data science. And so data science for me means more building predictive models, right? So when we're looking at data science, it's really determining what kind of proof of concepts do you want to run, and also regarding it as a proof of concept. And so it's not really about checking the box on, having done the analytics and now saying, oh, we've done it, let's move on. It's really about creating something and knowing that you have to continuously improve it going forward. And having that right mindset is not just about determining what the proof of concepts are, but also having that mindset to say, hey, we know this is a long-term investment. We know that we will, the first data model will be a proof of concept, and then we improve it from there. That's super essential to see it as that. And then last but not least, it's more on capabilities and data scientists and what they can bring to the organization. And I've learned this the hard way myself. In my team, I've hired people that have a very strong, background in data science, that are not necessarily understanding the subject matter at hand. And that becomes very difficult. And it's very key to build a team that really has the data science knowledge, but also understand the topic at hand, whether this is recruitment to mental health. And if you're going to build a data model for mental health, you need to have people around the table that understand mental health. And that is really crucial. And so from a capability point of view, or where data scientists sit in the organization, don't pigeonhole them. Make sure that they interact with the business or with the subject matter at hand, and they get that firsthand information. Yeah, I think those are the key things to get started.
Thank you for sharing that. That was quite a lot. I love that you mentioned about leadership, C-suite, leading by example. I think this is a very consequential piece here. You also mentioned being it for the long run. And training is key, making sure that there's training also and understanding the fundamentals. You dive into being agile also. And the last one, do not pigeonhole data scientists. And I think it's really also crucial that in terms of the domain expertise, you have to be hiring people that can really do the job, bringing those essential competencies. And also, I think this is something that's, I also love, not just checking the box. You mentioned that. Also just being proactive and, just making sure that you're continuously driving that improvement. Love those things.
And we see that either it's ticking the box or treating it as a shiny toy, and I think both is not great. If you tick the box, it means that you kind of feel like you're done and you can move on. And if you treat it as a shiny toy, you're kind of doing the same, but it's a very different mentality. And it's really about being agile, as you mentioned, and continuously improving.
Thank you, Sjiva. Now, if I remember correctly, your team focuses mainly on building predictive data models. Can you share with us what type of topics or problems seem to be hot at the moment across CX and EX, customer experience and employee experience?
Sure. As I mentioned, at the moment we are doing a lot of employee experience projects, quite a bit in recruitment. So companies that want to look at all of the data that they have and figure out, can we identify in the recruitment process what types of people have potential for, to perform well in the organization. It's something that we worked on as well with TDCX. Mental health is a lot of, questions around mental health, especially with people working from home, people, a lot of turnover that is currently happening. So mental health, like how do we identify people that are at risk for mental health decline? There's a lot of work in that area as well, and very interesting, I find. And it's one of the topics where, our team, on the one hand, we have psychologists and data scientists. They really have to collaborate together to make, to make a difference. We're also doing a lot of succession planning. I think also because there is currently, like, people are moving, and there's a question like, what does succession planning look like, especially for leadership roles as well, like who has leadership potential. That's also a question that pops up. So those are the key topics when it comes down to employee experience. In the customer experience space, things to do with how do we identify, the emotions of customers. And again, like, these days when you try to rebook an airline ticket, it's not always that easy. There's a lot of waiting time, when you finally get to speak to someone, determining what kind of emotions they have. So usually this is done based upon either text, voice, or video. My team looks more at text only because we specialize in text analysis and natural language processing. But very interesting is to basically see, depending on the emotion of a customer, and then how would you best react and deal with them to optimize, customer satisfaction. So very interesting data models. Also, from a customer point of view, a bit more in the marketing angle is how can we determine the needs of our customers. And this was a project that was targeting pregnant moms, which was very interesting because I was highly pregnant when we were doing this project. But a pregnancy is a 9 months journey. And so the question that this client asked, when is the expectant mom ready to hear about our products? Right. And just think about it. If you're just pregnant, you're not ready to think about diapers. You're not ready to think about, what kind of crib you want to buy or even insurance. Yeah. So it's really more about at what moment in time is there readiness for us to target them and to optimize our sales. And so that was a very interesting data project as well that we've recently done. So yeah, that is the stuff that we're working on. That's kind of what's hot from our perspective at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think a lot of organizations are really experiencing this point. As you mentioned, on the employee experience, we still have an opportunity in recruitment, and that's something that we really need to focus on, making sure that we hire the people that, as you mentioned, would have a potential to be high performing. Mental health, so many things happened in the past 2 years. Mm-hmm. And I think in the great resignation where we're at right now, a lot of employees are just easily giving up, and, identifying people at risk of mental health decline is really crucial, and really supporting that specific well-being factor. You also mentioned succession planning, that this should be created in the organization. And in the CX sphere, emotional forecasting or emotion forecasting, and the need for forecasting. So this predictive model would really help organizations. Sjiva, you mentioned text analysis and natural language processing. How can companies, organizations go beyond the traditional surveys? Because I think this still happens, there's still traditional models out there when collecting data.
Yeah, and I don't think it's going away, and it still has a value, right? I mean, we still look at NPS scores by asking someone, how likely are you to recommend this company? So I think it's probably not going anywhere, but when you're building data models to optimize accuracy and to reduce bias as well, it's important to look at a variety of data sources. And so
the more the better.
The more the better. And then it's for the team to kind of look at and say which one's more valuable than others to build a model. But at the moment, I always say that it's not about reinventing data. It's not about wanting to now measure something new. It's really about optimizing untapped potential that you have in the organization. And let's just think about this. More and more companies are realizing that they have real-time data that exists in systems. Like if you're using Microsoft Teams or Zoom, and there's lots of data that actually exists in these types of systems. Like, did you have back-to-back meetings today? Who did you speak to? Did you work after hours? Did you work on weekends? All of that data is tremendously important when it comes down to productivity and also mental health. And that data exists. It's just more about how do you mine it and how do you analyze it. Likewise, we do see companies moving a bit more into the IoT sensors and wearables.
Right.
Actually, one of the big 4 consulting companies in the UK actually gave their staff a fitness tracker. And basically the idea was that they would, measure sleep and exercise and, are you sitting, are you standing? And it would give them additional data on top of what they already had to basically look at your stress levels. And all of this is anonymized, but they have learned a couple of interesting things, like, when the lockdown was over in the UK and the bars opened up, that stress levels actually decreased.
True. A lot of people are excited to just
a lot
go
of people
back
are like,
to the old days.
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
But also when the performance reviews were happening, or it was time of performance reviews, that stress levels would go up significantly. And while those insights are not surprising, it's more about having that real-time confirmation, I guess, and for the team to take action. And so that's an example where they kind of did something new. I went into wearables, but usually my recommendation is like, you have a lot of untapped potential in the organization and let's optimize it. And so qualitative data is also an example of untapped potential. And there's now ways to analyze it, whether it's employee feedback, whether it's customer feedback, whether it's social media comments. I mean, there's way to analyze that on at scale at the moment. And yeah, NLP or natural language processing is one of the tools to use in that regard. Yeah.
Thank you. I've learned a lot just for this particular question. You mentioned, of course, the variety of data types is really consequential. We should be getting real-time data. Qualitative data is essential, and the use of IoT sensors and wearables, and we can just marry that with engagement as well. It's something that we can absolutely do for our employees within our organizations. That's an untapped potential, and that's actually already exist. I do have two more questions for you, Sjiva. Okay, before I dive to my last one, for you, like we've been talking about data and how important this is for organizations, how the need to look at this and how we continuously need to improve using this data that we have, that we gather. For you, what is the power of data? What is the real power of data?
Yeah, it's a good question. And so it's a tough question because I believe that data can be very powerful. It can be tremendously powerful, and it can assist in decision making. And decision making will always be a human activity, but it can definitely support decision making, informed decision making, and even there can be insights. You can discover things that you didn't know before. That being said, we need to be very careful in just analyzing data for the sake of analyzing data, right? So data is gathered in a specific context, and data needs to be analyzed in a specific context. That means that the way that you structure data, you need to know something, as I mentioned, about, like, if we're looking at mental health, people need to know something about mental health. And so that's where it is important to make sure that you have the capabilities internally to analyze it, especially when you're going into predictive modeling, because predictive modeling can be as easy as putting everything in and then seeing what comes out. And then if the model says, hey, we have a great accuracy, should you then start using it? The answer is no, because you need to also understand what's happening in that black box, right? So how do you make that box as transparent as possible is by including experts in the field in that conversation. And it's about really combining technical and non-technical people. And I think that's where the value lies. And that's how you unlock it to be powerful.
Such a beautiful answer. And on to my last question. How do we sustain a data-driven culture? I think culture is something that we really should be creating for our companies, for organizations. What are your top tips?
Okay. So for me, culture is all about behaviors, right? So I'm going to talk about behaviors. So I guess the first thing is to just expect, or let me rephrase, is to just get into action and to just do it. I think that is the first thing, and to not expect perfection. I think the mindset of experimentation when you start building the data models in-house need to be present, right? So it's really about seeing this as an experiment and you're learning on the go. So that is definitely key. It's about being consistent. As I mentioned, it's about leadership being consistent, but everyone in the organization being consistent as well. And then last but not least, I think going back to the point on training. Training needs to be provided for a reason, but to me, that needs to translate into people asking the right questions. If you understand the fundamentals of data science and you know the strategic objectives or the priorities that the organization has, what are the questions to ask to the data analysts, to the data scientists, to the leaders? And asking questions is very key, but obviously you need to be properly informed and trained to be able to do that. So asking questions, a culture of experimentation, do not expect perfection, but just get into action, and then basically being consistent. Yeah.
I love it. Action, not perfection. Consistency, you mentioned this several times in our conversation, equipping our people, it's that training piece, asking a lot of questions, and we have to be very specific in those questions, and a culture of experimentation. I think that innovation is very important. What a wonderful time to just be doing this again with your Sjiva, and you have made such a worthy emphasis on how valuable data is. And the investment in technology and human expertise, which are needed to have a system so data can be collected, as you mentioned, analyzed and used in people-driven decisions, is one that organizations need to prioritize. Thank you so much for joining us today for a wonderful conversation, and I can't wait to have another conversation, maybe a part 3, hopefully soon.
Let's do it. All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. And to our audience, thank you very much for joining us today. And we will see each other again at next conversation.
Thank you for joining us on this session of Transformative CX Talks. We have more discussions from esteemed CX leaders, so make sure to check out all our videos to learn more about the CX industry.